Hey guys, thanks for joining me in my first video for my new YouTube channel. I wanted to start a video platform for a while now, but it takes a little bit of time to relearn video editing software and get into the habit of making videos consistently enough. So I hope that I can be consistent in pumping out content so we can stay updated on what's happening in the animal rights movement and just kind of document what I've been up to. So today I'm going to be talking about why I decided to go vegan, and why I also decided to get active in speaking about animal rights, and why I decided to make a YouTube channel. So about 6 years ago, my parents had brought home backyard hens, and these hens came in a little cardboard box, and when they brought them home, I'd never seen chickens that young before in my life, and seeing these little cotton balls for the first time was a little overwhelming, to be honest, because they are adorable. They're so adorable. They look like literally just tiny little cotton balls with legs and a beak, and all they do is cheep and chirp the whole time. And we had to make sure that they had warmth. They had like the heat lamp to stay warm, and we had to wash our hands and make sure we're super sanitary around them and just kind of give them that extra attention that a baby would need. And after about 2, 3, 4 weeks of having, I think it was probably about a month into having these chickens, they were a couple of weeks old at this point, and there was a time when I remember I was petting one of them, and I had them in the palm of my hand, and I was sitting there petting her, and I was on the porch area of our house, and my mom had actually opened up the door, and she sticks her head out and she says, "Hey, come inside, dinner's ready." And I said, "What are we having for dinner, Mom?" And she says, "We're having chicken." And there was just this moment for me where I said, "Okay, I'll be in a minute." And I kind of looked at the bird that was in my hand, and I just made this connection. There was just something that was like the light switch for me. It was a pretty powerful moment, and I kind of realized that, holy shit, I would never want to hurt one of these birds. But I suppose in a way I'm responsible for hurting a bird, because it's in the oven right now. And me saying that I want chicken for dinner is me hurting a bird, That was the start of a really long journey for me. It took many years to kind of realize, all the things we do to animals. So that night I decided that I wasn't going to eat that chicken dinner, and so I refused. I told them I wasn't hungry. And the next evening my parents had made chili. It was a chili, and there was a lot of ground beef or cow in the chili, and I told them I wasn't hungry again. I told them I didn't really want the chili, and they asked me what was wrong, why I didn't want the chili, because usually I eat dinner. I'm pretty consistent with eating meals, and I told them I don't think I want to eat meat anymore. And that was a really big moment for my parents, and I started crying because it was really powerful, but it was a lot of stress because I knew my parents were going to take it personally. They thought I was maybe, I thought that they were wrong in the way that they had raised me, or the diet that they had raised me in, and so I started crying, and they told me to just pick out the ground beef, pick out the cow from the chili, and reluctantly I did that, and it didn't really make me feel good. It made me actually really sad that I had to actually pick out the body parts and kind of just eat the beans and the sauce, even though there's still bits of cow in there. But that was the start of a very long journey for me. I gave up all red meat, all poultry on the spot, and that happened for about 6 months, but I was still eating fish at that point. And it wasn't until about 7 or 8 months later that I gave up all bodies, and so I was officially vegetarian at that point. That lingered for about 3 years that I was vegetarian. I went throughout high school, getting teased, I was just like that vegetarian boy. I never really associated it with an ethical standpoint. I just realized that if I want these products, I'm paying for their bodies, and so someone's chopping up their body, and I just saw that as kind of wrong in my mind. I had yet to associate it with being immoral, which it is. Nowadays I do believe consuming animal products is immoral because it's an optional act. Just like going to the circus is optional, eating meat is optional. But for 3 years I was vegetarian, and there was one point when I was in high school and I got a phone call while I was in class and I couldn't take the phone call. And I got a text message just a couple of moments later. It was from my dad. And he said, chicken got attacked by a fox. One is dead, or something along the lines of that. And it was a really powerful moment for me. I was like stricken with grief. You know, one of my friends had died at home. So I asked one of my friends if she could give me a ride home during lunch. And lunch was the next period. So, maybe 30 minutes later I was home. And my dad was, outside with a gun. I guess he had chased off a raccoon. And there was a body of a bird who had, gotten all torn apart. And we had to bury her. And there was another bird. She's bright yellow, but she had been attacked as well. And she wasn't necessarily injured, but she was definitely very scared, very paranoid, very traumatized, I would say. So we had to separate her from the group of chickens. If you don't know this, if a chicken is injured or sick, the pecking order will essentially, she goes down the pecking order. So if you're an injured or sick chicken, you're going to go immediately to the bottom of the pecking order. And when that happens, everyone is subject to attack you and essentially kill you because you're seen as like a threat. They think you're sick. They don't want that's illness to spread throughout the pecking order of chickens. So she was then getting abused not only by, raccoons and external animals, predators. She was also attacked by her sisters. And there was a point where my mom, my dad, and myself were talking about her fate, essentially. What do we do? Because she also wasn't laying eggs. She was in such an emotional state that she had stopped laying eggs completely, and so she was essentially just living a life in confinement away, to be safe, and she wasn't laying any eggs, wasn't doing anything like that. And my mom proposed a couple scenarios, and I proposed a couple scenarios, and my dad kind of looks at us and he says, why don't we just get rid of her? She doesn't give us any eggs anyway. And that was the next moment for me. That was the next big moment for me. My dad had said, why don't we just get rid of her? She doesn't give us eggs anyway. And then I realized why people go vegan. Because she's not an egg machine. She gives eggs to us, but in reality, we just take the eggs from her. And I always thought of their lives as being more than just what they give to us. And so that was the next light switch moment for me. It was like, this is why people go vegan. To prove the point that their worth of life is more than what they give to us. If that makes sense. It does make sense. And so I looked more into veganism that week, and it was initially to kind of prove the point to my parents that I thought of the birds as more than just egg machines, as for their bodies, as the next meal. I thought of them as way more than that. I thought of them as companions, as friends, as my responsibility, and that was a massive moment for me. So on my 19th birthday, I decided to give up all animal products entirely and commit to going vegan. That was almost 2 years ago. And when I went vegan, it went well. I had, my routine physical, and, I was healthy. I was getting everything that I needed. I wasn't an unhealthy vegan. And it wasn't until my 21st birthday roughly around that time, that I realized that I really wasn't doing everything that I could to stop the suffering that animals were enduring every day. When I went vegan, I just realized all these things were occurring in the world. I never really looked into the horrors of factory farms, or how much we really exploit animals all throughout the world. It was a very personal scenario for me, so I think that's why it took such a long time. But I realized that I wasn't doing everything that I could. So I realized I had to be vocal about it. And I associated that with my happiness too. I think that everybody should be vocal about things that they want to stand up for. They see an injustice in the world. I think it's crucial as citizens of Earth to stand up against injustice. And that's exactly what this was. And so I realized very quickly that not only do I have to be vegan, but I also have to be actively promoting veganism. That's the only way that we are going to reduce the demand of animal products and reduce the suffering that animals have to endure, and hopefully see a day where all animals are liberated and no longer exploited for human purpose. So yeah, I decided to get active. I realized I wasn't doing everything I could, so I started slowly transitioning my social media to talking about veganism. I realized I was going to receive a lot of hate, and a lot of people I knew were going to unfollow me, but it was a big injustice. It is a big injustice, and it's still happening. So it doesn't matter what happens to my social media. It doesn't matter what happens to anybody's social media. That's a really vain thing to have to worry about. So I decided that I was going to talk about it as often as I could. I was never going to let their suffering, slip from my mind, because it really is an optional thing to think. But we don't have to think about these things. But it doesn't mean that it's any less real. Animals are still getting their throats slit at this very moment, and we must do everything we can to help them. So last year I had the privilege of going on a little trip, a internship with the nonprofit Vegan Outreach, and that was a big eye-opener for me. For over a month I was traveling, and I learned that every day we can do something to fight towards animal liberation. And that was the first time that I was working 30 hours a week promoting veganism, and it was amazing. It was an amazing time. So when I returned home, I had all this energy and I was super inspired. So I looked into more animal rights nonprofits, and I decided to become an organizer for Anonymous for the Voiceless. If you're not aware of what Anonymous for the Voiceless does, or AV, they do street activism. So we go out on the streets, we have televisions and tablets, and we show people the realities of what happens behind the animal agriculture industry, behind the animal exploitation industry. And then we initiate productive conversations with the public in the hopes of reducing the demand of animal products. And it is a really effective form of activism. In fact, it's one of the most effective forms of activism. Worldwide, they have a total tally of almost 500,000 people who are seriously interested in going vegan in the near future. So it's definitely proven itself to be an effective form of spreading the vegan message. So what I want to get out of this channel is I want to share all the little adventures that I'm going to go on. We're going to be doing a lot of activism in Daytona Beach, a lot of street activism, but I'm also going to be doing environmentally relevant stuff. We'll talk about deforestation, we'll talk about beach pollution, ocean acidification. We're going to be visiting farms. There's dairy farms that I want to visit. There are slaughterhouses and vigils that I'll be attending, and I hope to get a little bit of content out of it so I can share it with you guys, because it's important to remind ourselves of the world around us, because the privilege of America really is this bubble that we can live in. It's optional to have to care about these things, but I, for one, am choosing to care about it, and I hope you do too. So yeah, thank you for joining me in my first YouTube video. I hope to see you next time. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel. I will be posting hopefully weekly is what I'm shooting for, but don't hold me to that. But yes, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.